Yes, hello, this is Ed in San Diego. And that's downtown San Diego in the background. And this show is called Curzon Comments. And this is, I think, number 8 in the series. And our special commentator and our partner in this is James Moss, who's a Brit, but living in New York really successfully. Program here. So, James, let's go to you. What's happening in London property today?
Well, there's actually a lot going on in London, and I've got a few slides which we can go through in a moment. But um, covering London and New York and a bit of relocation. But London is fast changing in many different ways. Um, we're seeing quite a lot of international buyers going into London, which is really interesting. Um, we're also at the same time seeing an exodus of very wealthy people who have long been in London leaving. And these include entrepreneurs, heads of companies, international, but also an increasing number of Brits. And the reason for this is that the government has introduced the abolition of what's been known as non-domicile status, which has been in the UK for something like 200 to 300 years type of thing. And basically what it means is that if you are a wealthy resident in the UK, up to now, if you're an overseas resident, you could pay £30,000 a year. So what's that? Well, 45, $50,000 a year to the government, and you would not be taxed on your global wealth.
Global
Okay.
wealth, not just
Yeah,
what's earned in the UK.
exactly. Not just what you've got in your bank account in the UK or the house you live in the UK, but your global, um, your global assets. So
So this,
that,
so this this niche of people, they've got huge assets.
yeah, I mean, we're seeing people like the Mattel family who own Tata Steel, who I think are the wealthiest family in the UK at the moment, certainly one of the leading wealthy families who've been in the UK for decades, and they're upping sticks and they're going. And large property developers, Livingston Brothers, who are very well known in the UK, probably multi-billionaires, moving to Monaco. And there's part of the problem also is that after 4 years under the new system, not only can they be taxed on the global assets, but they also have to pay inheritance tax on those assets, and that is the real killer, to be honest with you. Um, so what we are seeing is this very high number of people leaving. And some people may say, well, why does that matter? I mean, they're rich, it doesn't matter. Well, it actually has a massive impact on the UK government exchequer because these people run businesses, they support charities, they do good causes, they employ people. And when they leave, they move their businesses. They stop supporting charities because they're not there to do it. They stop supporting the arts. And the HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs Service, have got their numbers all wrong. The Treasury got their numbers all wrong. And they figured that with these people moving, that somehow they were going to make more money. Well, exactly the reverse has happened. And I think it's a great shame for the country.
So would you
Um,
call that, this is injecting a bit of humor, trying to,
yeah, go ahead.
self-inflicted wounds, um, and because of making a mistake, it's almost like putting a tariff on the greatest source of wealth creation.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great metaphor. Home goal, killing the golden goose, a couple of others you could throw in there. And yeah, it's it's unfortunately it's going to have a very big negative effect. The UK should be wanting to attract these people, uh, and others into the country. It's a fantastic country. London's a great city, like New York's a great city. And in fact, they're driving them away. So that's one side of sort of what's happening there. And then on the other side, we were seeing some terrific purchases going on in London with Americans. Americans are actually the largest buying group in London at the moment, and we're seeing some terrific transactions from some very smart people, you know, um, who own multiple homes. By the way, I mean it's not as though they're going to live there, but so it's an interesting picture.
So some of the properties, and I know you have a slide or two or
Yeah, yeah,
three to show, which we'll get to in a minute. But some of the properties that are being sold are from these ultra rich people, and they're unloading and redeploying their assets.
yes, that's right. So you've got you know at the top end, you're almost sort of seeing an oversupply. I mean, it's a really bad market for Asians. I mean, they're really not doing anything like the levels of business they were doing. And of course, with more people leaving, there's more properties on the market, high-end properties on the market. Um, and there is a more limited market for those. And that combined with some other things, again, which we'll take a look at in a moment, actually creates a very attractive buying opportunity. I mean, we manage buildings in London for clients, private clients. We manage some blocks, and since beginning of the year, I've taken calls from people who I work with over there. I mean, um, clients, owners of buildings, who are saying to me, we're thinking of leaving, of going to places like France and Switzerland and Italy, and the really rich ones to Monaco, because you need to buy your way into Monaco. And they're saying would like some advice. What is, what's the market like? What do we need to do? How do we prepare? This type of thing. And these are calls that I've never taken before. And of course, you do the best you can to be helpful. Um, but it's yeah, it's a changing scene at that end of the market. So
So I invite you to use my screen share to display some of this information. Let's continue our dialogue.
sure, well, let me see what I can find. Give me a second. Uh,
Okay.
let's take a look at this one here.
So in San Diego, the real estate prices keep going up, albeit slower than New York, which is, I think,
Um,
double or triple the rate of increase over San Diego just in since January. So here
wow,
we are. Yeah. So
that's
I
why
mean,
is that out of curiosity? I mean, that's a huge jump.
yeah. So that's New York. Okay. That was just published yesterday, I believe, that the rate of increase uh, in Manhattan is like 7%, whereas it was 2.5 or something in Southern California. And so that means New York is getting much more expensive,
Yes.
and San Diego is still going up. A single family home in the metro region average is 900,000.
Oh,
And condo, uh, one bedroom condo, small in the downtown 92101 in San Diego would be over 500,000, probably 600,000.
oh,
All right,
good
and
numbers.
a two bedroom, and this is not ultra luxury.
Mm.
It would be close to 1 million, if not over. And you get into more upscale, it's mega millions. So let's take a look at these beautiful old properties. Now, would an old house like this have an elevator, a lift?
Yes, often they do.
Yeah, because I would think
They
there would be a lot of stairs. Boy.
Oh yeah, yeah. This property here is in the heart of Holland Park, which is next to Notting Hill Gate, and it's one of the most select and lovely areas of London, West London. It's right next to Holland Park, and these are sort of Victorian villas, what they used to call villas. And they are stunning. They're absolutely beautiful. I mean, you can see from the architecture. But inside, they've been often transformed to the most amazing homes. This particular one, I believe, is the one that Eric Schmidt bought of Google for 42 million
So let me ask you,
pounds
are
earlier
those
this year.
two distinct properties, or is it all one property?
Well, it's interesting that a lot of them did get broken up into apartments, and we have freeholds and leaseholds and all that sort of stuff. But many of them then got, or many of them stayed houses and then were reconverted to houses. So the house that we're looking at the moment, Richard Branson owns two identical ones, almost identical, next door to each other, further down the road. And one he uses as his home, the other he uses as a quasi office. And apparently, he throws the best parties you can imagine for his Virgin team and Virgin staff. And he's a very easygoing, switched on guy. And so it gives you a sort of feel for it. It's sort of movers and shakers. This is where a lot of very serious players live in this part of London.
So let me ask you another question about these two white buildings that we're looking at side by side.
Yeah.
Um, so these are two buildings, not one, uh, and it looks that way. It appears to be separate buildings,
Yes.
and each of them are in the Victorian era, from that era on the exterior, beautifully maintained, it looks like. And
Yes.
so uh, part of this block here that we're looking at, some of the units within these structures would be multi-story, others would just be a flat.
Yeah. I mean, some of them will be buildings with apartments in them. Okay, and they'll be split up into flats. But many of them are actually now houses or have been converted back into single residences.
Interesting.
Often the basements have been dug out, so you have swimming pools down there and spas and saunas and all that sort of stuff. You'll have screening rooms, movie theaters. A lot of that went on in London. In fact, they tightened up on that a few years back because they found people were building double basements. And it was actually having an effect on the London water table. There was so much of this going on. And the local authority, uh, so the Kensington and the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea and Westminster and a few of those other major ones, put some restrictions on, so you can only dig down one level rather than two or three.
Isn't that
Uh,
interesting? Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
All right. So Eric Schmidt bought one of these, one that looks like this,
yeah,
the whole
exactly.
the whole building. Oh,
Yes,
yeah,
that's right.
the whole thing.
The interesting thing about that purchase is that obviously Eric Schmidt owns lots of homes and lots of properties all over the place. But he bought it to rent it out as a rental investment,
Hmm.
which was actually really smart. Um, I mean, one of the things that's happening in London, the luxury end of the market, is that more and more people are renting at the moment, choosing to rent rather than to buy. So it's a sort of fairly new phenomena going on. And one of the reasons is the high levels of interest rates. People don't want to sort of get caught up in that. The other reason is very high levels of stamp duty, which is like sort of mansion taxes, if you like,
I
on
see.
purchase. And, they can be they can be as high as 19% for an offshore overseas buyer and so on. So those can make people a bit gun shy. Whereas here in New York, for example, your mansion tax, which would be the equivalent to stamp duty, is only 1%. So you sort of get these different dynamics driving the market at the moment. So I think Eric Schmidt's uh, purchase as a rental is actually it should really be very successful. There are not a lot of properties and houses in this area of this type that you can rent, and there is a market. People do love to be in London, but they don't necessarily want to be, tying up huge sums of equity and so on in London, unless they're looking for longer term investment, which is still terrific in London, by the way. Um, so you've got this very healthy rental market, luxury rental market. Um, and that's just at the top end. The rental market in London is actually really strong right now because there's a shortage of stock as well. So you've got this almost this sort of perfect storm coming together for landlords. Less so for renters. It's getting more expensive.
Okay, so this is really interesting. So uh, the dollar is down. Is the pound up?
Yes, and the pound has actually rocketed up since the tariff announcements by the Trump administration. Since Brexit, the pound really sunk. Actually, it got really really low. It didn't quite get parity with the dollar, but it wasn't that far off it. And that produced some really good buying opportunities for anyone in US dollars, which doesn't just mean Americans, it also means petrodollars. So you had a lot of Middle Eastern investment coming in, for example. But since Brexit, the average discount, currency discount for American buyers in or US dollar denominated buyers in London's been an average of about 18%. But I have actually seen it quite a bit higher than that. And at the moment, it's probably dropping a bit below that.
Well, that's great. So what else do you have to show us?
Okay, well, let's have a look at New York, if I can find the right button here to push. Here we go. Bear with me.
I'm impressed with your tech skills. No, seriously, I don't know how to do that.
I don't know. Believe me, Ed, it's hit and miss sometimes. You've got to find these little buttons. Anyway, it's always fun and interesting comparing what's going on in Manhattan and what's going on in central London. And they're two very different cities, but they're still very connected in so many different ways. So let's, without sort of going into too many specifics here, What we're seeing in New York, interestingly, is also a growth in the luxury rental market, just as you're having in London. And the medium rents, you can see there, for the top 10% of listings, was up 8.4% on this time last year, reaching an average of about $10,600 a month. And I can tell you there are a lot of listings much, much higher than that. So you've got that going on. The general rents, again, you've got a shortage of stock in New York. It's really Manhattan and Brooklyn. Those are the main areas we tend to operate in. And in February there was a 4% increase in rents from the month before January, hitting a medium rent of 4,730 per month. Um, and that's going to make it challenging on the relocation side. One of the things that is now happening, right, is the vacancy rates are getting a lot lower. And one of the corollaries of that is that we are now seeing bidding wars breaking out for rental properties again. And in February, they accounted for almost 27% of rental deals. So, so it's in the rentals market across New York. You've got a lot going on, and you've really got to know what you're doing when you're renting a property. I mean, that's one of the reasons that Curzon represents a lot of corporate and private clients these days. Is we advise and steer, negotiate, and lock deals in. I mean, a big part of this is locking a deal in. Um, and one of the challenges is that no two properties are the same, and no two landlords are the same, and no two agents are the same. So you've got this whole myriad of things you're having to deal with, board packages, God knows what else, all sorts of things. And you're dealing with all these different people and these sort of inconsistencies. I have to say you get pretty good at it after a while. But you never get any guarantees. Um, anyway, touch wood, our client testimonials are pretty good, so it's pretty okay where we are at the moment. But the market's just getting going here. Spring is here. Everything's in bloom here now, Ed. It's like the last week or two. Well, everything's gone into bud, and I was looking out the window this morning, and I thought, this is amazing. I mean, a week ago it all looked so different. 2 weeks ago, um, but it's
Okay, spring is
prime rental.
sprung.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
that's nice. Well, I wish you well this buying and selling season.
yeah. It's good. We're also just starting to roll out a property management service here in Manhattan, specifically for private clients. Um, and that's a really interesting market. A lot of people moving to Florida and so on. You have the whole tax situation here in New York. You spend so many days here, you end up paying New York city taxes. So it's a really really interesting market. We love it. It's a great city.
When
Absolutely
you
fantastic.
say property management in Manhattan, what does that mean with on the private client grouping?
But for us, it means really looking after their properties when they're not there. And that can manifest itself from fairly mundane things like cleaners and stuff like that to complete project management if they're sort of redecorating or remodeling, that type of thing. We know how to run those projects. We're really very experienced at that. And we have the tools of the trade, so to speak, to do that. We find that many architects don't really offer that service over here. Architects are more inclined to produce plans and then pass them over to a contractor and then let the contractor get on with it with minimal supervision. And that's a problem. We do a lot of this in London. We do it for, British and international families. And we do it very successfully. And we're sort of, the eyes and ears and boots on the ground to make sure the job gets done properly, on time and on budget. And I think that's something that I think is something that New York could really do more with, frankly, more of. Um, and and it's again, it springs into other things that we do here in the city.
Oh, it's very interesting. Okay, and do you have another slide?
Yeah, they have one more. So I thought we'd have a quick look um, at what's happening with tariffs. I'm really thinking of relocation here. Okay. So can you see that, Ed?
Yes,
Good
very good.
slide there.
Very clear.
Okay. So um, we're absolutely apolitical here at Curzon. Um, and we follow very closely the impact that tariffs are having on US and international companies and how that is impacting their relocation programs. So what we're doing here is we're just having a look at a few of the factors, and just to pick out a couple of things. I mean, business relocation is really a challenge now. Um, higher tariffs, in increase the cost of moving, and there's a lot of uncertainty around. Um, some companies are, looking to avoid those tariffs, so they've got to figure out ways of doing that. Do they relocate their businesses? Do they relocate their people? So where do they do it? How do they do that? One of the interesting things I think is with the change in the supply chain shifts, which I think is really, really fascinating. And companies, you know, international companies, Apple was a great example, where their phones are assembled, made in China and assembled in Asia, and then moved back to all sorts of places. I mean, they go across many borders many times. And what's very interesting, you may have seen this in the paper the other day, is Apple now doing a big shift of their assembly to India. Um, and I think that's a really good example. You have these two wonderful expressions called friendshoring and nearshoring. So you're sort of, you're moving your supply chains to your friends, where hopefully your tariffs are not going to apply or going to be a lot lower. Or nearshoring, moving them nearer.
So the
Um,
tariff is a tax,
a tariff is exactly that. It
right?
is
It's
exactly a
an
tax.
add-on. In other words, you're paying someone to be able to do something.
Yeah, what you're doing is you're paying a tax to move your products or your goods into a certain country. Okay. So if you're a manufacturer in China and you want to ship, say, toys to the United States, uh, you have to pay a tax to the United States of an additional 145% or whatever it is. So when you have things like that going on, well, it almost makes it prohibitive to actually ship to those sorts of markets where it's so expensive. So one of the things that you may do in a situation like that is look to other markets where they don't have those level of tariffs. Um, so you can sort of get a feel for the impact. If you look at the sort of again looking at the macroeconomic effects of that, you'll find that companies, organizations, companies, and it's manufacturing we're talking about here and goods. We're not talking about services, just to be clear. Is that countries with lower tariffs and lower trade agreements tend to work more within themselves, or markets that exporters will divert their products to. And the EU is a great example of that. And there are others, but the EU, I think, is a particularly obvious one. So the other thing is of course, moving your manufacturing processes and factories into the country that you want to be supplying, and you don't want to be paying the tariffs for, which is the Trump administration stated strategy. And that is things like car manufacturers, for example, from Asia, will build factories and manufacturing facilities in the United States, and they will manufacture,
in return for no taxes
and they
or
exactly,
some small amount.
exactly, and this is the Trump administration's theory that that will then create, jobs, more jobs for Americans and so on.
Economic development.
Yeah, and that's where they're coming from on that,
So
and
I
that's
want to jump in and just say something, trying to inject some humor here into a very dry topic. So we could go to dinner at PJ Clark's, for instance, and a hamburger and fries and a beer might be 25, $30, right? As opposed to going to Jimmy B's bar down the street, and you can get the same kind of food, maybe not as good, but the same kind of food as a product, and it would be $17.50. Okay, and you could go to the 21 Club in Manhattan, and
okay.
it'd be $100.
Yeah, 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 indeed. I mean, and some of that will be, most of that will be local produce, but some of it won't. And of course, in more polished establishments that you are very used to roaming, Ed. Yes, you pay a bit of a premium for the pleasure, which which is absolutely fair enough. I think that's one of the nice things about the world. You can be doing that. Um, but yeah, but when you start looking at cars, for example, which is a good one, when you start looking at automobiles, and you're looking, you're looking for a truck, for example. I'm just putting out a truck at random. You actually have a lot of choice. There are a lot of trucks available, but they're all made in different countries and different places. And so perhaps part of your buying decisions, a bit like your hamburger and your fries and stuff, is you're sort of going to say, well, where can I get the best value? And it's all part of the grand scheme, right? Um, the only thing I would say is regardless of one's views on these things, just from an economic point of view, it takes a long time to build these factories. I mean, I was reading about one the other day, and I think they're putting in 500 million to build a monstrous. I say monstrous, I mean large. I don't mean that negatively. Factory somewhere in I don't know, the Midwest or somewhere like that. And it's not going to happen overnight. And then you've got to equip it, and then you've got to man it up, then you've got to start the manufacturing process. And it's not just like sort of throwing on a light switch. Um, so there are a lot of factors to take into account. But the bottom line is that it actually makes planning pretty tricky. And we move a lot of people. I mean, we work, as both as mentioned earlier, in both the corporate and the private markets. So we sort of see it from a multitude of angles. But from a company point of view, corporate point of view, it does make relocation a lot riskier and potentially a lot more expensive.
Wow,
So I
this
wish
is
I could
really
find some
this
humor
this
on
this
that.
is really an interesting talk. Yeah. Okay, so let's discuss what's going on in London today. The city of London is growing. It's a very old area, and a lot of the historic buildings are being part of a brand new investment structure. Um, and when I was in London last year, we did some traveling around the city, around St. Paul's area,
Yes.
in particular, and just entire blocks are just being hollowed out, and new high rises are going in. So some of this is boom times for the financial district, the city.
Well, it's really a good point actually, and as you know, we deal with commercial property. I was a commercial agent for many years in London, and also here in New York, we do commercial real estate, which I love actually. I think it's great. One of the interesting things is that London offices, prime offices, so it's like where you were around St. Paul's, there's Paternoster Square around there, which is all a very modern, state of the art, high end, grade A, I think you'd call it. Offices are filling up again. And it's interesting that companies really want to be back in the city of London opposed to Canary Wharf. So Canary Wharf, very similar to sort of, I guess, the Hudson Yards or the Bowery here in New York. I mean, it was the same developers as the Bowery. And a lot of those buildings now, that estate, and it's fantastic. I mean, it really is brilliant. And it's easy to get to on the tube from London, central London. It's like 10 minutes or something. It's actually a terrific place, but a lot of those buildings are now being converted to residential buildings and hotels. So the most notable one is the HSBC building, which is sort of right bang in the middle. Which you may well know it from your various.
Indeed,
Yeah,
we did three meetings there.
yeah, and it's a terrific building. But the plans are to, when the time comes, which I don't think that's far away, is to convert it to a sort of residential green, very green building with hotels and gyms and restaurants and some offices, communal workspaces. So that's great, and so you're seeing that there. You're seeing, say, people returning to the offices in London. Seeing some great conversion. Centre Point, which is a lovely, well, 1960 structure, tall. You may know it, sort of around Tottenham Court Road, and that's now being converted into apartments, and very successfully. And there's moves to do the same with the post office tower. And the post office tower again is another sort of 1960s. It sort of looks like a bit like a spaceship with a bit of a wonky top to it. It used to have a revolving restaurant. And anyway, there were plans afoot to sort of refurbish that and bring it back into use. I'm not sure how far they got with it.
So
Um,
the HSBC is relocating into a new building that's not built yet, but uh, it'll be right smack dab in the city, in the old financial center, which is now a new financial center.
yeah, the old financial center is now the new financial center.
Yeah,
And
which is really a great thing to see
oh,
happen.
it's lovely. I mean, it's some wonderful places around there. Leadenhall Market, Spitalfields. It's full of history. It even has Roman artifacts there. It's a great museum. The City of London is well worth a visit. Um, yeah, there's there's a lot going on, and it's good. London is definitely coming back, certainly in terms of offices and so forth, and workers, and the work environments are better. Many more open spaces and green spaces and stuff like that.
I remember years ago you took me into the castle, into in the city, the what's it, HAC? Uh,
That's exactly right. We did,
yeah.
or you did that wonderful session at the Honourable Artillery Company, the HAC, of which I am a member, which is in fact the oldest regiment in the British Army. It's a reserve regiment now, and the history is fantastic. And to give you an example, when the Mayflower came to America with the Pilgrims, the security on the ship was actually the Honourable Artillery Company, who were then in those days the militia. I mean, everyone was a militia in those days, and that became the foundation. So the Pilgrims came here, and that became the foundation of what is here one of the very well known and very highly regarded reserve regiments in Boston called the Ancient and Honorable Artillery Company. This is just a by the by, which is sort of half club, half military. They're actually um, a guard unit, so they go on active service, and they've done the Gulf Wars and Afghanistan and stuff like that. But they also have a club side to them, and they have some very esteemed former members, JFK, RFK, Tip O'Neill. I noticed a number of other presidents the other day have also been members. So yeah, so that was sort of quite a nice connection. And in London, in the what they call the coffee in the dining room, which is you may recall as magnificent hall, there is the Stars and Stripes
So
flying
I
very
remember, let's
proudly.
see, I remember that bar scene vaguely, but what's one thing that stuck out and is still in my sights is well, a couple of things. Some of the armor
Yes,
that are scattered around the area, and it was I think a red velvet decor with
yes, that's right.
very English traditional furniture, the mixed in, and this is a bar, so it was really good drinking there. Thank you.
Well, it's a fantastic bar. It's called Suttling Room because well, obviously went for Suttling there. And I think it's one of the best bars in London. It's obviously a private members thing, but yeah, I mean many happy hours there with friends and colleagues, and I think the event that you and I did there was terrific. I think we did that in the medal room, which is full. Well, I say full of. I mean, there are a lot of Victoria Crosses there, and some great stories, great heroics from the various wars. I mean, the going Boer War, First World War, Second World War. So.
We're talking with James Moss, and you could tell he just loves to talk about British history. And I remember you took me around into some of your favorite pubs in the city. So
Yes,
we're going to have to do that again.
we must definitely do that. And you knew the best one. You knew the best one, which was, I want to say, the Eagle, which I actually hadn't been to before. Do you remember that? And it came from the nursery rhyme. I'm not very good on nursery rhymes anymore, but Pop Goes the Weasel. Do you remember this, Ed? And Pop Goes the Weasel. I can't even decipher that at the moment, but it basically was a reference to I think it's the Eagle Pub on the City Road, which you and I went and had a pint at.
Well, we were in
Uh,
many.
Yeah, yeah, it was lovely. It was lovely. It was great. But I'm reading, interestingly, just to throw this in, I'm reading lots of American history right now, particularly going back to the origins of the United, well, before the United States. We're going back to like the 1600s and so on. And the first, arrivals and the government set up in Virginia and New York and places like that. But it's written from the point of view of the people on the ground, not the heroes, but the regular sort of people. So the sort of regular workers, the servants, slaves. Um, and, it's absolutely fascinating. And, 1776, of course, the main revolution and so on, and and all that great stuff. But what was interesting was how many revolutions and revolts went on, 100, 200 years before that, in the very early stages of the colonies. So anyway, I'm just passing that on. I can't remember quite the name of the book, but it's something like, the people's history of America. And I would highly recommend it. It's very readable. It's a great book, actually, and fascinating.
Thank you so much for sharing all this information. And with that in mind, I want to invite you to come and do some storytelling about that book on our program called Books and Authors.
Ah, great,
Okay.
great. Well, I'll look it up and I'll get the title right.
So this is James Moss in New York City, and I'm in San Diego. And James' company is called Curzon, as you can see it right there on the screen, Curzon, curzoncentral.com. And you'll see all about James and the various business interests. So Absolute Reload now is .com, absolutereload.com. It's part of Curzon Central and critical to today's uh, restructuring mobility management.
Yeah, what we did with that is that we actually changed the name at the end of last year to Curzon Relo. So Absolute Relo, it's now new Curzon Relo, which is very technology driven and very real estate driven. Um, Really, in New York, in London, and of course, our global relocation reach. But we now have everything under one brand, Curzon, which makes life so much more manageable, um, and gives us more options, a crossover between what we do with our private landlords and our relocation assignees and people we work with and the private people we work with is great because we see it from everyone's point of view. So we read markets, we know how to structure deals, we know how to guide landlords to get the right properties for, would be sort of tenants. We know how to guide assignees to find properties and to negotiate the best deals because we know the hot points, the tipping points, if you like. So everyone gets a great outcome. And it's unusual. You tend to get people to just do relocation, or just do real estate, or just do residential. And we're sort of much more direct than that. We're sort of a bit more diversified than that. And the sort of the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, if you like.
This has been delightful, and I'm really glad of the clarifications about what you're doing. CurzonCentral.com, it's all there. Old-fashioned, hands-on customer care combined with the latest
Yeah,
technology. So
absolutely.
it's very unique.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
It's
being on the show.
yeah, been fantastic, Ed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, this is Ed signing off. I'm in Southern California, 100 miles east of LA, about 3.5 hour drive north of San Diego. Can't beat it. Thank you.
Excellent.